In-silico is more and more used in the context of computer modeling and simulation. And it has to be distinguished from in vivo, this is in the body, ex vivo, outside the body, and in vitro at the bench. And the idea is to simulate individually patients and create cohorts that can be used to assess effects, which usually are measured in the patient. So it's a kind of support for the investigations in real patients. There are different approaches which are applied. We have more approaches from the information science, like artificial intelligence and machine learning. And we have more mathematically based techniques, like differential equations, mechanistic models. So there is a broad spectrum of models. And there are also hybrid approaches which try to combine the strengths of the different models. With in-silico methods, with virtual cohorts, you are increasing the knowledge about the situation, about the outcome. And that helps to plan animal studies, to plan in vitro experiments, and to plan clinical trials. The main target is to improve and optimize clinical trials by shortening and by decreasing the sample size.
Let's first explain what are in-silico clinical trials. So an in-silico clinical trial is a personalized computer simulation to help in the development of a medical intervention or a medical device. So why do we need these for the catheter-based aortic valve replacement procedure? Well, we need these simulations because there are still some post-operative risks involved with this procedure. So for example, when the stent exerts an excessive force on the aortic tissue, this might lead to tissue damage, but also to conduction problems. And this might eventually lead to the need of a permanent pacemaker implementation. But when the stent exerts an insufficient force on the aortic tissue, then this might lead to stent migration or paravalvular leakage, where blood can flow past the stent back into the left ventricle of the heart. And these post-operative problems can negatively affect the quality of life of patients after the procedure. So within SimCore, we aim to use in-silico clinical trials to optimize the TAVI procedure to help prevent these post-operative risks. So to this end, we developed a computer simulation, which is based on the finite element method, with which we can study the effect of, for example, different deployment strategies, but also stent size or patient-specific features of the aortic root geometry on final shape of the stent, but also on the forces exerted on the tissue and the stresses induced in the tissue. So this means that we can use these finite element simulations to gain more insight into which patient-specific circumstances might lead to these post-operative problems. And the idea is that in the future, clinicians can use this knowledge to optimize and plan the procedure better, and this hopefully leads to less post-operative problems for patients in the future.
Patients with heart failure may receive an implantable pressure sensor to continuously measure the pressure in the pulmonary artery and help adjusting their heart failure medication. This tiny sensor must be safely anchored in the patient's pulmonary artery. It must stay in place for many years without damaging the vessel or disturbing the blood flow. Before such a sensor can be implanted in patients for the first time, it must be thoroughly tested. The anatomy and hemodynamics of patients can vary to a great extent. Arteries can be small or large, curved or straight, thin or thick-walled, with high or low blood flow rates. To test these interpatient variabilities, we use computational models of the patient's pulmonary artery and the sensor implant. The sensor will be virtually implanted in a virtual cohort, resembling the distribution of geometrical, mechanical, and blood flow-related parameters of the typical heart failure patient population. In simulations, we perform an in-silico clinical trial to calculate the force that holds the sensor in place or whether there is disturbed blood flow. With this information, we can assess the probability of clinical long-term complications, such as sensor dislodgement or lung embolism due to a blood clot, only when the sensor implant has been demonstrated to be safe in silico clinical trials. Real clinical trials would be started.